Hi everyone, it's Jordana here from the Community Media Training Organisation. I thought I'd just jump in at this point. We seem to be just having a bit of technical difficulty getting Danny back on the line. So we're just working out getting him on the line. We've got a number of people in the room. We've got about 106 people viewing, which is fantastic. The whole CMTO crew is here, and we're going to be hearing from Jason Villalelli and Maddie McQueen from SIN very shortly, and we will also be hearing from Joe Pratt from 4EB. So if you could just hang tight for a couple of minutes while we get the program started. Feel free to say hi to each other in the chat box. Let us know how things are going at your station. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, throughout the session, you can use the Q&A box, and you can also pop questions in the chat. People will be monitoring the chat. But I do advise you to use the Q&A box because there are a lot of people in the room today. So if you want your question to be answered, pop it in the Q&A box so that we can get to it and make sure it's answered. If you are unable to get on, or if you're hearing from people who are unable to get onto the live stream, it will be broadcast live on the CBAA's Facebook page. So just send them to the CBAA Facebook page and they'll be able to view the stream. It's just that we're capped at 100 people in this room at the moment, and we've reached that limit. So if you haven't, if you're hearing from people and they can't get into the room, send them to the CBAA Facebook stream. Everyone can get online there. Okay, so I think we've got Jason on the line here. Jason, can you pop your microphone and your camera on for me? Oh, there's Danny. I can see Danny now too. And Jason, have we got video from you? Or perhaps... Oh, there
we do, yeah.
All right, fantastic. We've got Jason on the line too. We might be having some internet issues across the country as the entire country moves online to run their businesses, etc. Oh, we're getting lots of hellos coming into the chat box at the moment. We've got Annette from Cairns. We've got Neil from Today's Country, Alice from 3CR, Stephen in Kempsey, Trish at 4EB, Philip in PBA-FM, Henriette from BFM. Oh, they're going so fast. Zena from Canberra, Mahendra. Where did it go? Oh, they're just popping up the screen. Excellent. Mahendra from 3ZZZ. We've got Margaret from Triple B in Barossa Valley. We've got Millie at Rocks FM, Nancy in Mildura. We've got Michele, sorry, in 3CR FM. It's just, yeah, it's really going off here. Now, I've just had a message from Danny to say that he has been kicked out of the system. So we may have to proceed without him, Jason. I hope that's okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to hand over to you and to Maddie. And we've got Joe Pratt on the line as well, I'm hoping. There's Maddie. Hi, Maddie.
Hey, hello, everybody. I don't think we have Joe. I think we have Alex Nagel instead.
Okay.
Also
fantastic.
From 4EB, but
from 4EB. Okay, fantastic. Alex from 4EB we've got online as well. All right. Well, I will hand over to Jason if that's okay. Is he kicking us off?
Yeah.
There's Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Hi, Alex. Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you very much to everyone for joining us on this session. The session is going to be all about how you can work towards producing your program from home. We'll have a little bit of a chat about some of the tools that you can use to do that. We'd love to hear from you about particular difficulties that you're having, so pop your questions in the Q&A and we will make sure that we're cycling through them. I'll get Michaela to come online, who is from the CMTO, to assist us with questions later on in the group, the session. So if we want to kick off with Jason, he is our head trainer at the Community Media Training Organisation, and he's going to start us off with this session. Don't forget, if people that you know are trying to get in and view this session, it is being recorded, so we'll send it out, but also it will be on Facebook Live. So just tune into the CBAA's Facebook page there and you'll be able to view it as well. All right, handing over to you, Jason. If you could just switch through to your slideshow view, that'd be great.
Yep, doing that right now. How's that looking? Is everyone seeing the main screen on their
We
screens at the
sure
moment?
are. We sure are. Okay, thanks
No
very
longer
much,
me?
Jason. I'm going to
Great,
sign
thanks.
off now.
Thanks for that. So before we kick off,
Hi,
just like
Geordie.
to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where we broadcast from. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So thanks everyone for joining us for today's CBAA webinar, which is brought to you in conjunction with the Community Media Training Organisation and the National Ethnic and Multicultural Broadcaster Council, so the CMTO, NEMBC and CBAA all together on this one. So I'm one of the three presenters for today. My name is Jason Vallely. I'm the head trainer at the CMTO, also being joined by Maddie McQueen from SYN Media in Melbourne, although she's sneaked into New South Wales for today's broadcast, and Joe Pratt being covered today by Alex Nagel from 4EB up there in Brisbane. So as we've got on the front screen there, our presentation today is all about creating content remotely, and certainly a very timely presentation given the very challenging times that we're living in at the moment. I'm going to give you some really practical tips today on how you can actually put your content together somewhere other than your home radio station studio. Yeah. What we're going to learn about today, how to set up your own home for recording remotely. Now, Maddie and I do this on a weekly basis. In addition to our roles in SYN Media and the CMTO respectively, we also produce content for the Community Radio Network, and both of us do that from home. So yeah, the Community Radio Network has very strong production rules on how everything needs to sound, and we will talk you through some of the things that we do in our own respective homes in terms of putting that sort of content together. We're also going to talk about how you prepare your pre-recorded program for broadcast. There's a couple of different ways to go about that. And most importantly, how do you get your programs from your home back to your home station? So that's all going to be coming up over the next hour or so. All right, I'll throw over to, throw over to you, Maddie, to talk about setting up your space.
Yeah, totally. So we'll start off by showing you, well, telling you how to set up your space at home. So we're going to go through a bit about equipment, a bit about your at-home studio setup, and then we'll also talk a bit about production protocol and standards. So starting off with the essential equipment that you'll need while you're putting everything together. Do you have that next slide, Jason? No, next slide. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, cool. So the first thing you're going to need is a computer. So make sure you have either a desktop or a laptop computer, and you want to make sure that that computer has the capacity to store your audio files and also to run your software that you need, particularly your audio software. Once you've got that, you're also going to need a recording device and a microphone. I've got my set up on the screen right here on the right there. You can see that I'm plugged into my laptop. There's a little portable Zoom H5 recorder, and then plugged into that I have a Shure SM58 microphone. So usually I use that Zoom as a portable recorder. I don't plug it into my computer, but when I need to record from home and not in the studio, it's a really helpful way to make sure I can get that analog mic getting the signal right into my computer. And the reason I plug that analog mic in instead of just using that H5 is the H5 has the condenser microphones on the top, and that analog, dynamic microphone that I have connected in is a bit more directional and doesn't get as much of the outside noise that's coming from, you know, my family and the rest of the house. So that's really helpful. Once I've got that recording device set up, I also need some headphones, so you can see those hanging on the laptop, a digital audio workstation. So I use Reaper, that's up on my screen there. And then also it's not in this picture, but really helpful to have an external hard drive where possible. It's optional, but I think that makes it a lot easier to make sure you're not taking up all of the space in your computer, and you're storing those big audio files somewhere that you can refer back to. So that's my specific microphone setup, but I guess we'll go through some different other options for what you can do. At SYN, a lot of our volunteers don't have anything to record with at home. Actually, they do have things. Sorry, Victoria, that I'm referencing specific gear. I will get into now, like what you can use at home if you don't know about all of this specific gear. Jason, if you could throw up that next slide, that would be helpful. Thank you. So what we're telling our volunteers at SYN is to just use whatever is most available to them. So this is the diagram I'm giving them, that's sort of telling them from the orange zone to the green zone how quality is going to increase depending on what microphone they use. So starting in the orange zone, the inbuilt computer microphone, if you have a computer to record with, it probably has an inbuilt microphone. This obviously isn't the best choice, and I've been telling volunteers to use this as an absolute last resort. But if you set up the right situation and you have a good recording setup, if you have a good enough microphone in your computer, hopefully you can pull something together that has an okay audio quality. Better than that is an inbuilt phone microphone. So most smartphones nowadays record audio fairly well. I've used my iPhone. Here's my iPhone. I have an XR. I've used this a couple of times to record grabs, and if you do it in a controlled environment where you don't have too much echo and you're really careful with it, then it can sound pretty good. So that's an option. If you don't have any gear at home, just record into voice memos and then email that over to yourself to edit. You can use some headphones as well. Sometimes headphones have a little remote on them that have a microphone inside, so that can be helpful. Or if you have a headset with a microphone on it, that can have a good sound to it as well. You just need to make sure you're positioning that properly and you're watching for rustling on your clothes when you're doing that. And then obviously the best option is to get yourself a microphone. The reason at SYN we're saying you can still use these like phone microphones and headphone microphones, even though they're not always the best quality, is I know a lot of people are struggling with money in these times. So going out, well, not going out, obviously, getting a microphone delivered to your house might not be an option that's available to you. Sorry, Jordy, I'll slow down a little bit. That might not be an option that's available to you to go out and buy a USB microphone or an analog microphone. But if it is, then a USB microphone can be a really good option. The reason it's a good option is that it doesn't require any extra gear to go along with it. So if you get an analog microphone, you're going to need an interface and a cable, and all of these things add up and end up costing a lot of money. Whereas the USB microphones are just a one-off cost and you can plug them straight into your computer. So I would really recommend that. Jason, do you want to tell us a little bit about finding a space to record in?
Yep, sure. You can hear me again now?
Yeah, we've just got a hot tip in the chat from Johan who said, if you have a headphone mic, it's a good idea to scotch tape that to your clothes to reduce rustling. So if that's the option you're going with, maybe try that out.
Great. I'm just having a bit of trouble. Oh, there we go. Just having a bit of trouble advancing to the next screen. Okay, so I guess one of the challenging things that we have when we're doing putting content together outside of our studio is that we haven't got the luxury of a studio that's got all the right acoustics for broadcasting. But don't worry, you can do this in your own home. You just need to think about a couple of little creative things. So one of them might be, which Maddie does on a weekly basis, is to hide under the doona. You'll be surprised how much of the background noise that you can get rid of by using that particular technique. Hiding in a cupboard under the stairs. I knew somebody who used to do that quite often. Obviously, it's not ideal for long periods of time. The garage, that's my particular one. If you've got a garage, especially with most people's garages where you've got a lot of boxes and things around you, they provide excellent sound acoustic absorbance. So it takes away a lot of that particular echo. And also just test out a lot of the possible locations in your home. If you've got a home where you have carpet on the floor, then that's a bonus already, because that's going to take away a lot of that echo that you would normally get associated with recording in that sort of environment. Probably an easy way to do it is just to walk into a particular room where you're about to set up and just clap your hands. And if you can hear that sound of echo, even a slight echo, because microphones are fairly sensitive, especially a lot of the ones that were talked about on that last slide, then you'll know straight away that you might have a little bit of a problem. A little bit of an echo is not too much of an issue, but yeah, if you can find a location where you won't have any whatsoever, then you're certainly in a much better position to put together some broadcast quality audio for your program. Eliminating background noise is also a big thing as well. So if you find that your home, if you're living in an area where you have a lot of road noise around, perhaps consider doing your recording of an evening when there's less traffic and the like around. Yeah, or if there's a particular part of the house where there's noise from domestic appliances or other people around, you obviously need to think about ways to isolate that particular sound. And you won't be doing it for hours on end. Think about it when you're putting content together at home. The only portion of it that you really need to worry about in terms of finding that space where there's no echo is essentially the vocal part. Obviously, if you're doing a show where it is all talk based, then yeah, you do need to set aside a location to do that for whatever the duration of your program is. If you're doing more of a music-based program, then obviously it's only the part of the program where you would normally be broadcasting on air, your mic breaks, in other words, yeah, where you need to consider that for the recording side of things. And most importantly, don't hurt yourself. Don't go doing anything silly when you're trying to find a creative place within your home to actually do the recordings. All right, here's a couple of studio setup examples. That one is my own one on the left-hand side there. So I'm using some slightly different equipment to Maddie. At the bottom of the picture there, I have just a regular Behringer mixer. They're not overly expensive, a little bit under $200. On top of the little suitcase there is a Sony portable recorder, not too dissimilar to the Zoom recorder, which Maddie had in the earlier picture. Over onto the right-hand side is my microphone stand and a Behringer microphone, condenser microphone there, and a set of headphones. So it's essentially stand up, do the recording through that, and all the recording is then captured onto my recorder. I then take my recorder back to my desktop computer, which is in another room, and through a USB connection from the recorder itself straight into my computer, I'm able to transfer across the files which I have recorded in that studio particular setup there. Over on the right hand side is another example of a simple and straightforward studio setup, a little bit less wiring and cabling in that one. So you've got your computer in the middle there. Over to the left is a USB microphone, which was one of the options that Maddie talked about in that earlier slide. So it's essentially a microphone that doesn't need to be powered by a mixer. It's powered by your computer. So the microphone goes straight, the lead from the back of the microphone goes straight out of the microphone, straight into your computer. And if you have your digital audio workstation or your software, your audio editing software running, you can essentially record exactly at the same time as you're speaking. So there's no need for any other devices to be placed between the two of them there. As we said at the top there, household items such as empty boxes, you can see quite a few of them lying around there in the picture that I've got, really do help pad the sound and otherwise reduce the echo that you may get in that room. And especially when you're using either of those two microphones that you see in those two pictures there, both are very sensitive microphones. They're both condenser-based microphones, so you will get a little bit of background noise with them. So you do need to make sure that you try and pad out that with whatever you're able to do. Another option is to go with a dynamic microphone like the one that Maddie had in her earlier picture, which is a Shure SM58, quite a common microphone to be found in most broadcast studios. Very good at isolating a lot of that background sound that you would otherwise pick up from a condenser microphone. And as you can see, both of those setups there, you don't really need a lot of space, just enough to place your equipment on and also to have some area to place your notes on as well. So we'll get to the notes section in just a moment, but it's obviously very handy to have all of your notes, script, run sheet, and so forth to hand when you are working your way through the recording process. Okay, production protocols and standards. So we've talked up until now with regards to different areas when you're home that you can find to record from, some of the basic equipment, a couple of different ideas that we have there as well. Okay? And as you can sort of see there, very straightforward equipment, nothing as flash as what you would find in the broadcast studio. So it really comes down to you as a producer presenter to actually make sure that you get the best possible sound out of the equipment that you are using. One way to do that is to always make sure that you get the right recording level. A lot of those recorders, like the one I use, the Sony, and the one that Maddie uses, the Zoom, do have what's called auto level recording on there for you. That way, there's less of a need for you to set a particular level before you start recording. The recorder will do all that for you. The advantage of doing that is that it will keep a reasonably consistent volume level for your recording throughout. You're going to have less chance of distortion, which obviously occurs when you push too much gain into the recorder itself. And similarly, if you're recording a little bit too low, it will boost that level up for you as well. That said, you still do need to keep an eye on the levels when you're pushing input into these devices, and even more so when you're doing that other option that I showed you a moment ago, where you're using a USB microphone straight into your digital audio workstation. And we'll be showing you shortly how you can monitor the levels as you work your way through. Wherever possible, get another person to check your work. That's really critical, especially when you're creating content outside of the station. You may be doing it in isolation at the moment. You may not have anybody else around you that you're able to bounce those ideas and get a second set of ears having listened to. So part of the process of you putting your content together, share it with somebody else at your station. You may have a production person who would do that role for you when you're actually sending the content through to your station. But it's always really great to make sure that you've got a second set of ears having listened to what you're putting together before it goes out on the airwaves. Because guess what? They're probably going to hear something that you might have missed. It may be something minor that you might not even have to bother about fixing up. In a lot of cases, yeah, again, something that you might not be able to pick up. Standards, of course, are going to vary from station to station, so you need to check with whoever's in charge of your production requirements at your radio station as to what the particular standards are. And what I'm talking about in terms of standards is what sort of file format the end product needs to be sent to the station in. Is it a WAV format, an uncompressed WAV format? Does it need to be, is MP3 acceptable? If so, what sort of level are you able to go down to, or is there a particular setting for that? Similarly, the length of your program. So you may do a 1 hour program. However, there may be other commitments such as sponsorship announcements and the like, which need to go out during the midst of your program. So in order to be able to accommodate that, you may need to split your program up into little blocks. So the part of the program where you would normally say, we're now going to some community service announcements or some sponsorship announcements, that's the part where your recording would stop. And then those details will then probably be played from the playout system back at your station. But again, all this will vary from station to station. So you need to check with the people involved, generally your production coordinator or your station manager, to find out what the exact requirements are from that side of things. Here we have a little slide on microphone technique. So when you're recording from home, essentially the same sort of principle as you would use in the studio. So basically a hand space between yourself and the microphone is ideal in terms of not getting too close to the microphone. Using wind socks or microphone socks is still a good option. Doesn't matter exactly where you're recording from, even if you are doing so inside. A pop filter is also handy as well if you've got that as part of your kit of items that you have to your disposal at home. But over on the right-hand side is essentially the waveform. Now, that's a screenshot taken from Adobe Audition, which is just one of many digital audio workstations or pieces of software that you can use. But one thing that is fairly much in common with most software programs is what's called the waveform. So in other words, the way to measure how loud or soft the material that you're putting into your audio file is. I guess probably the best way to describe that is it's essentially the equivalent of the VU meter. So the little meters that tick or displayed digitally on the desk in your studio and let you know how loud or soft the material is that you're putting to air. Exactly the same principle applies in digital audio software. So you can see an example of a good waveform. So a good waveform is where you have a reasonable amount of space or black area between the green lines and the top of the screen there. So that's what we call headroom. So essentially it means that you're giving yourself a little bit of a buffer between full blast and something that's sort of sitting a little bit below that. So you can see in the top one there are some parts where it's fairly low and then some parts where it's a little bit high. But even in the high parts, which is generally when a person is, putting a bit of inflection into their voice or getting overly excited about something, then you will be tipping the top there, but you're still nowhere near the top. So in that top good waveform, you should have a very clear, crisp sounding piece of audio. Whereas in the bottom one, which is what we're calling a bit more of a poor waveform, you can see there, the audio is not overly concerning there, but there are some points there where you can see it's tipping all the way to the top of the screen. And by doing that, you run the risk of encountering something known as clipping or distortion, which is very, very difficult to get rid of using filters and the like. So you want to make sure that your recording is not being boosted too loudly into your digital audio workstation. And the best way to do that, as we said earlier, is to make sure that you have the volume set a little bit lower on your microphone or whatever device you're using, or if you're going through a portable audio recorder like a Zoom or the Sony that I showed you earlier, that you might think about using the auto level function, so that way the device is controlling all that sort of stuff there for you. All right, I'll throw it back to Maddie about constructing a show.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so next section, now that we've set up our little home studios, we have to get to actually making our programs. So we're going to talk you through some digital audio workstations, your audio editing softwares, some methods for constructing your show, how you stay organized when you're making your show at home. We're also going to chat about facilitating interviews and working with co-hosts when you're in when you're in different spaces. And then finally, we're going to finish off talking about finding music files. So to start off with the digital audio workstations and talking through that audio software, on this next slide, we've compiled a few options. I love talking about digital audio workstations and I have a lot of opinions about them, but it's a really personal thing. Everyone has their favorite that they like. And so what I'd really recommend is trying out as many as you can and taking advantage of the free trials to figure out what works best for you. If you're looking for a free option, then GarageBand is one to go with on Mac. If you're using a PC, then you can use a inbuilt already called Windows Sound Recorder, and that will only record audio for you. It won't edit anything for you. And then another great free option that you can download is Audacity. Audacity is sometimes a little bit annoying when you're doing more advanced audio editing, but for putting your show together, it should work for you pretty well. It's a really great piece of free software. If you're able to spend a little bit of money, there's heaps of options available to you, but the ones that we've decided to highlight are Adobe Audition, Hindenburg, and Reaper. So Adobe Audition is a software I'm not actually that big a fan of, but I know that Jason uses it at home. A lot of people really like it because you can go into different views. So you can have a multi-track view with multiple different audio sources, and then also have a waveform view where you're just looking at one little piece of audio. That works really well for some people, and it also works really well if you're using other Adobe products. So if you're making stuff to go along with your show on applications like Premiere that do video and that kind of thing, then Audition can be really helpful. It's I think about $30 a month, so it's a bit pricier than some other things, and also is a monthly payment. Hindenburg is a great option as well. You might have seen the Hindenburg people at the CBAA conference. It's a great piece of audio editing software, and they have a few different options for what you can get. I believe it's a one-off cost. Hindenburg, it's $120 something, and that comes with a 30-day free trial. So I would say give that one a go for 30 days and see how you like it. And then the final option we've put down is Reaper, which is the software that I use mostly. I think it's a really great piece of audio editing software. It costs $60 for the license. So that's a once-off fee, unlike the Audition where you pay every month. You just pay once for Reaper, the $60, and they have a 60-day free trial. Actually, during COVID-19, they're giving away free licenses to anyone doing anything from home until the end of June. So you can grab a free license until then if that's a software you want to try. The only con with Reaper is that it's sometimes a little bit tricky to learn how to use. Once you know how to use it, I think it's really great, but it's, hard to learn. Yeah, most softwares have trial versions. So if there's anything not on here that you'd like to try, I'd recommend trying the trial and seeing if they're giving away any free licenses or extended trials during COVID-19. So once you've got your software, you can start putting your show together. Jason uses a method called the drop-in method that I'm sure he'd love to tell us about.
Yeah, sure. So this is a fairly standard way of putting your program together. So what you're seeing on the screen there at the moment is a screenshot from one of those audio editing softwares known as Hindenburg. But one thing that you'll find, so I've used Hindenburg, Adobe Audition, and Audacity. That particular screenshot, which is what's known as a multi-track view, is fairly consistent across all the different types of audio editing software. Probably the best way to think about it is that each row is the equivalent of a fader on your studio panel. So in the top line there would generally be your well, in this case, the top line in this one is essentially all of the music, all the pre-recorded content. The bottom line is the voice tracks. So it's essentially a matter of pulling in all of the different individual sound files. So you would have already, by this point, have gone and recorded all of your intros and your outros for your program. And if you're doing a music program, which is as is the case of the screen that we're seeing at the moment, then pulling in all of the digital audio files which contain the music. And then essentially a matter of putting them in the exact order in which they are to flow throughout the program, mixing from one piece of audio into the other so that you have a transition from your voice into the start of the track. And it makes it sound like essentially you were there in the studio doing the program, but it all comes together in one single audio file. Obviously, as you get better with the use of the digital audio workstation, you can do some flash things like fading the music tracks in underneath you so that the vocals of the song comes in exactly as you finish talking. But for someone that's just starting out new with it sort of thing, that's something that will come a little bit later. It's more about just putting things together in the prescribed order so that it sounds exactly like you were there in the studio. Another option for those people who don't want to use the drop-in method, so just to clarify, the drop-in method would be where essentially you're putting your entire show or brackets of your show together to send to your station so that it would then be played out as a pre-recorded show. However, there are some stations who have play-out systems that allow for a technique known as voice tracking. So in this particular case, you don't need to be putting together an entire file containing both music and voice, as we showed on that earlier slide. All you need to be concerned about here is just recording your mic breaks, and then the play-out system will then be programmed in such a manner in that your mic breaks will then proceed or come after the music tracks, with all the music then being played out of your play-out system. Of course, you'll need to make sure that you've got somebody at your station, if that's not your personal role, who will go through that process of embedding your pre-recorded mic breaks into the audio editing system. But from the perspective of recording it at home, there's actually a lot less work that you would need to do under this type of scenario. All you need to be thinking about is just recording your talk breaks into separate files and making sure, most importantly, that you label those files individually and in such a way that if there's somebody else that's going to be tasked with putting all that together for you, they know exactly what it means. So mic break 1, mic break 2, mic break 3, that sort of thing. Community announcement, something that all makes sense, and obviously accompanied with instructions and or a run sheet sent to the person back at your station who is tasked with that role of putting it all together in the voice track. And this can be done within a few minutes, or under an hour prior to it's all going to air. So for those sorts of programs that need that timely information, such as your breakfast and drive programs, the voice tracking method is really ideal, because essentially you're recording everything on the fly, sending it into the station, and it's being broadcast out a short time later. All right, we'll throw it back to Maddie to talk about the importance now of file management.
Yeah, make sure you're naming your files. So I've put in 2 examples here. We just want to make sure we're naming our files clearly to avoid overwriting files, but also to make things easier for the person on the other end who's receiving them. I think, Alex, you put your hand up before saying that was you at the station scheduling everyone's stuff in.
Me. Yeah. I definitely enjoy getting files that are voice recorder _ 0721 _ something. So yeah, file name conventions are good.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to make sure that you're making Alex's job easier and naming your files in a way that makes it clear what they are. So down the bottom here, I've got an example of what it might look like if you're using that voice tracking method. So just saying voice break 1 and then your show name and then the broadcast date. I think it's really important to make sure you're putting the date of broadcast on here and not the date of recording. So if you record it on Monday and your show is on Wednesday, make sure you put Wednesday's date in there to make it easier for the person scheduling to put that on the right day. And then up the top, I've got an example of what I do every week with the show that I help to make. It's called All the Best. So I record in Melbourne and then I send that recording to Sydney. So I've been doing remote content for longer than coronavirus has been around, and this is what we do. So I just say ATB and then I say where I made the recording and then put the date on that to make that easy for my producer to see. Yeah, I think that's all about file management. Just be clear and concise.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks for that, Maddie. All right, run sheets. This is something that you should already be using as part of your program, but it's even more important when you're doing a pre-record. In fact, I'd say it's just mandatory. It's just a must. Probably for 2 reasons. Number one, it'll help you with that file management side of things in terms of knowing which items need to go before other items. It's also a good time management tool as well. So on the screen there, you're seeing a sample there of the run sheet format that I use for my own community radio network program, which obviously has to be produced at a specific time duration each week's program. So essentially my run sheet is essentially a combination of a script as well as the run sheet. So in the middle of the screen there, I've got all my notes in terms of my introductory script, a little bit of background information about each of the musical artists that I'm playing. And then over on the right-hand side, I've got 2 fields there. One's called duration, so it's allowing enough time for how long my microphone breaks are going to be, and also the exact duration of the music track. And then right down at the bottom, which unfortunately I can't show you on this screen, because it's in an Excel spreadsheet, it's actually adding up the details as well. So essentially this is what I'm doing even before I start that recording process. Yes, there are going to be a little bit of variations in terms of how long you're talking for and so forth, but you can get reasonably close by using this particular method. And then in the far right-hand column is what I'm calling source. So in other words, where that piece of audio is going to be coming from. So you're going to find yourself in a situation, especially when you're putting together an entire pre-recorded program, where you might have lots of different content. So you'll have your pre-recorded vocals for your ins and outs with your mic breaks. You might have music that you're putting in. So you need to remind yourself, okay, where have I kept that music? There might be other content, say a pre-recorded interview that you've done from earlier on, or someone has sent to you, or you may have some other station announcements which have been provided to you in advance that you also need to put in. So you need to accommodate for all of those in terms of both the time and the location where you're going to be getting them from. And that will all form part of what is your run sheet. All right, Matt, if you want to talk us through script. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, there's also the option of doing a script. So if you don't want to ad-lib and you want to avoid having to record multiple takes, then a script's going to be a huge help. I do up a script every week for All the Best. We actually do a lot of takes. It doesn't stop us from making multiple takes, but I think we'd do a lot more if I didn't have this script. And basically this is how we set it up. So similarly to a run sheet, we make sure we've got all of those little pieces of audio that we're going to be sprinkling throughout. So right at the top there, you can see that we've allocated a spot to make sure we put in our theme music, and then we play a series of stories each week. So we also put each story in as it's going to be going in, as you can see down there with that Josie Steele story, and then we clearly allocate. So here's the intro section, the back announce section, and then, yeah, I write it out and read it just as it's written. What we do when we're recording this is we record it instead of in small audio files, instead as just one big audio file. And then the way we keep track is we use these little time codes that you can see up the top of the paragraphs. So those big numbers are all actually minutes first and then seconds after. So at the end of me reading out this little bit of script, I will type in the time that's in my audio workstation. The first time I read this, it was ending at 21 minutes and 42 seconds. So I just wrote that and then did it a bunch more times. Apparently I didn't do a very good read the first 2 times because we had to do this one 5 times. And what we usually do is just underline the takes that are good so that we can ignore the first 2 takes unless we really need them. So that's a really helpful way to get through that scripting process. I think we had a question before about how we record phone interviews while we're doing social distancing. So hopefully this helps you out a little bit. This is also helpful if you're co-hosting a program remotely. So you can use a few different types of software. I would recommend, instead of doing it through the phone, using an internet platform like CleanFeed or Zencaster. They'll help you. So they record the audio for you. If you have your audio going into your computer and whoever you're talking to also has that going in, you can get that file from CleanFeed or from Zencaster straight from them without having to do any extra editing. So that's what we do for All the Best. We use CleanFeed every week. And I also record it on my computer just in case, but it's helpful to have that CleanFeed feed as well. And then if you don't want to do that, if you want to do it as like a Zoom catch up or a Hangouts or Skype kind of thing, then you can go through and just make sure you are all recording that audio on your own computer. And a really good way to align all of your audio is to just do a big clap at the beginning, a much bigger clap than that, so it makes a big awful sound and peaks your audio. And then you can just all line up your audio where the peaks would go when you're editing it together. Send it to one person to do that. However, that can be a bit more complicated because you want to make sure that the audio from other people in your Skype session or Hangout session isn't coming back through to your audio editing software. So I would really recommend you using these things like CleanFeed and Zencaster where possible. In regards to phone interviews, quickly, we didn't put this in, but just because I saw it in the chat, just to add some extra on that. If you do want to do a phone interview, there are a few different apps that you can look for. I use one called Tape on Call, which I think cost me a couple dollars. But if you're having a phone call, then you can record that call using that app and then email yourself that file from your phone to put into your audio editing workstation and figure it all out from there. Here's a great little guide that 3CR put together a few a few presenters at 3CR have made this YouTube tutorial about how to make a radio show at home while we're all practicing social distancing. So that's really fantastic. There's a link down the bottom here, but I know you probably don't want to have to write down all of those letters. So these slides will be available after this webinar. And you can also jump onto that, the community radio COVID-19 response page. I know this has been posted there, so you can scroll through there and try to find this video, and that should help you figure out how to make a radio show with more than one person from the comfort of your own home.
Great, thanks for that, Maddie. I'll just also answer another question that I saw earlier on that I accidentally hit the answer live button rather than typing an answer to. So somebody asked a quick question earlier with regards to using the inbuilt microphone on your laptop for recording, whether that's okay. Really depends on the laptop. Probably some of the high-end laptops like your MacBook Pros and laptops which have been, I guess, purchased in the last year or so have reasonable microphones. In fact, I'm talking to you now from a microphone that comes straight out of the laptop. So it's just really going to vary from place to place. But we would continue to recommend, as we've been saying earlier on, that if you can get a microphone that plugs in externally, so a USB microphone, or through a Zoom recorder, that's probably your better option. All right, let's continue with the presentation now. Mindful of the time, we want to give everybody some opportunity to ask some questions again. How do we get music into your show? There's so many different options out there, and the good thing is that these options allow you to bring that music straight into your computer in a digital audio format. So there's nothing else that you'll need to do with that piece of audio before you place it into your audio software or your digital audio workstation. First and foremost, of course, is AMREP's AirIt site, which we can all apply for an account with for free as a community radio broadcaster and get some great Australian independent music through that site. There's a couple of other options, Play MPE and DMDS, which will provide you with new releases from both Australia and overseas, mainly artists who are signed to the major record labels or mainstream media side of things there. You do need to apply for an account through both of those portals, but if you mention that you are a broadcaster, mention the name of your show and the station that you're representing, in most cases you will be accepted. Obviously, you can also purchase music from places like Bandcamp, so that way you're supporting the artists directly. Google Play, iTunes, and other sources that you can find online. If you are a presenter who until this point in time had always been going into the studio with your box of CDs and playing them straight out of the CD player into the studio, fear not, you can still bring those CDs into the digital audio workstation. But what you need to do is rip them. So what we mean by ripping is actually converting the CD into a digital format. And basically every computer will have a piece of software that will allow you to do that. If you're using a Windows PC, the Windows Media Player, which comes stock standard with your Windows license, will allow you to do that. There'll be a similar type of program that's available to you through the Mac. And if you are using any of those digital audio workstations that we were talking about earlier, they all have functions to be able to rip CDs as well. But we would suggest that you do a bit of a Google search. There's so many great tutorial videos out there which will walk you through the individual process for the particular piece of software that you're going to be using. And then once you've got all of that music into that digital format, so you either downloaded it or you ripped it from a CD, it's then a fairly straightforward process of them importing it into your digital audio workstation using that drop-in method that we showed you earlier on. So you will end up with a combination of those microphone breaks that you've recorded yourself through the various methods, together with the music that you've placed into the workstation at the same time. That's the front page there of the AirIt website, the AMREP AirIt website. When you log in, you'll then be able to have a listen to, you can actually preview all the tracks on there. And then if you decide that you want to download it, there's a download option there as well. They also still do have an option to send out CDs, but probably not a good idea at this time. Save yourself a little bit of time. Get the audio sent to you directly in that digital format, and then away you go. You're ready to start embedding that into your program. it's also a good idea to set aside some time when you're doing this sort of stuff. If digital audio workstations is going to be something new to you, you've got to learn how to use that workstation in the first place. And it takes a little bit of time to sort of start picking up the particular techniques of putting a program together. Don't fret though, don't sort of think, oh, there's all this extra time, it's all too hard. Think of the time saving that you are having by not commuting to your radio station and also sitting in the studio and presenting your radio program. That time that you would have set aside, so for your 1 hour or your 2 hour show, whatever your time slot is, you can actually use that time to put together your program through the digital audio workstation. Once you get reasonably good at it, you'll start to get faster at it as well. But I think initially, if you allow the same amount of time for presenting a program or editing and putting a program together, you'll find that they're pretty much on par. Obviously, at the outset, when you're still getting used to navigating the software, if you've not used it before, probably need to add a little bit of more time to that. But all of those other planning techniques, the writing of the scripts, the preparing of the run sheets, all that sort of stuff you would be ideally doing already before you go in to present your on-air program. And as I was just saying, the other time where you'll be doing that presentation, you would then be using that same time now to actually attend to the audio editing process. All right, getting your show to air. Now, this is going to vary from station to station. So again, we're going to provide you with a whole list of options here, but you do need to speak directly with the people at your station that have been tasked with this particular role. And we'll throw to Alex fairly shortly on that front, and he can talk about how he manages this at a very large station in Brisbane for EB. First off, it's actually you as a presenter. How do you get your files from your home back to your radio station? So the most obvious ones are Google Drive, Dropbox, and WeTransfer. All of them allow you to sign up for free. Yes, there are some limitations with Dropbox in terms of how much storage can be on there before you need to pay for it. But if you're doing a weekly program, it's as simply as uploading your program to Dropbox, sharing that link with whoever it is that needs to get access to it, and then they can then download the file at the other end, and then making sure that you then remove those files so that you don't build up your storage to a limit where you're then going to start getting charged for it afterwards. Google Drive, much the same, and WeTransfer as well. So very good tools with regards for getting a file from one place to the other. And the files are reasonably big, just depends again on what format that the audio needs to go into to be able to get to your station. And again, we'll get Alex to comment on that. But again, you'll need to chat with your station to make sure what the particular format is. Yeah. There's also another option that's known as remote access. So you may be a technician or someone else at your station who's actually wearing two hats, for example. So you may be putting your show together and then also have the need to actually get that back to the station. So one way to take things like Dropbox and WeTransfer and Google Drive out of the process is to use a remote accessing tool. And we've got a couple there on the screen for you. VNC seems to be a fairly popular one at the moment, mainly because it's free. There are other options such as TeamViewer, Go to My PC, and AnyDesk where there is a subscription for them. But a lot of them also do offer a free monthly trial. So if remote access is something new to your station and you want to explore what the different options are, you can always go down the free month trial basis first and then work out which of the options work best for you. That'll allow you to do possibly not only just transferring the programs from home back to your station, but you may even be able to control computers at your station. So the audio playout system, you could actually control that totally from home if you were using the voice tracking method that we were talking about earlier. Also a great tool for technicians as well, who may not be able to even get into the physical station, but need to attend to the ongoing maintenance of uploading new programs, sponsorship announcements, community announcements, and the like, or even just as simple as fixing a fault. All right, Alex, can I get you to jump in, mate, and talk about some of the unique things that you're doing at 4EB at the moment in the midst of the current COVID-19 crisis?
So, at 4EB, my mic's being weird or not, but we are a bit interesting that we've got a lot of broadcasters that have only exclusively done live programs, and also quite computer illiterate. So a lot of things we're doing is just being really flexible. So no matter what, we want voices to go to air. So I've written up a few guides and stuff. I can share them in here, specifically about recording at home. And then as far as getting files to us, we have a FTP server, which depending on your station, I don't know if you'll have one set up or not. But as long as you get it to me, I honestly don't care. You send it by carrier pigeon, I'll schedule it. Let me just have a look at here. What have I got? But yeah, the thing that I've sort of noticed, I guess, is that you can't explain stuff too much. Being as thorough and, I don't know, like covering everything has been a very interesting thing for me with this. But as far as I'm concerned, if you just do your best, that's what we can do. My advice for some of these like recording at home sort of things is just give it a go. Like just record, play around, listen, trust your ears. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. What? I'm sure I've got something else. That doc will do. But as far as specific things, what can I think of that we've sort of been doing? I'm not really sure. It's just.
Do you have any?
Oh, hang on.
Sorry, Alex. How have you been instructing your presenters to make programs together while they're offsite? Like, what have you been telling them about interviews?
The way that has been a difficult thing to do. We've just been getting them to do, if they need to, in-person recordings with this, just a Zoom recorder on a desk, I'll sit around it. Social distancing rules, though, is that's something we're looking into. That stuff you looked at, the link before, was what I was going to look into as well. I can't remember what it was called. The software that links everyone together. That's probably the main thing. That's the hardest one. But at the moment, like the guide I've written up is specifically for broadcasters being home alone recording themselves, because our broadcasters, the skill level it's difficult to, like editing wise, computer literacy is low, so that's been a difficult one. Yeah.
Should we throw to some questions?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. Maddie, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hey Mick.
Yeah, hey, hi everyone. I'm Michaela from the CMTO. I have been answering some questions behind the scenes here, but I've seen plenty in the Q&A chat, so I thought I'd just read them off to you guys and you can answer them.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right. So up the top here, Chantel says, hoping to use, oh, hang on. Let me just go down here. There's quite a number. Okay. Sorry, I've just got them all open up. Okay, so Peter says, Peter Gill says some audio programs can grab multiple USB microphones by using ASIO 4, or I've done this with Studio 4 and up to 16 mics, so that's a great suggestion there. Anna Lee has asked, can I use my purchased music from iTunes?
Yes. Right? I think the answer is yes. The thing about purchasing music from iTunes is, sorry about the sound in the background. It's just started like torrentially raining where I am. But yeah, the thing about buying things off iTunes is that often they come in an M4A format, which might not be able to be dragged right into or imported right into your audio workstation. So if you just Google how to convert a file to MP3 using iTunes, there is a way to do that in iTunes. It often depends on the particular version you have. And so once you've turned it into an MP3, you'll be able to use the music you've purchased on iTunes. Yeah.
Awesome. And now we have a question from Nancy. So can you put Audacity on the record and just go through like you are in air? Go from microphone to record voice, then to playlist on iTunes and play track on playlist? Or do you have to do the drop-in method instead?
I would recommend doing the drop-in method because I think that option would actually be a bit more technically annoying, because you'd have to have multiple inputs. So you would have to have your microphone as an input, but then also have your iTunes playlist as an input going into your digital audio workstation. So I think it would make things a bit more complicated. Jason or Alex, do you agree with
probably
that?
the only other way you could do it, I mean, yes, it is possible to do the way that Nancy's talking about to avoid the drop-in method, but you would need at the very least a second computer. So you'd need one computer with Audacity running to actually capture the recording, and you'd need another computer which would essentially be your play-out system, so playing out the music straight from the hard drive that you've previously downloaded from iTunes. So you're almost like sitting there doing a live programming and having it being captured. So whilst it does take out all the drop-in method out of the process, I think from a time management perspective, it's probably more efficient for you to actually use the drop-in method rather than sitting there playing the music out straight into the Audacity program.
Getting the like studio workflow of just like hitting record and then doing everything at home it's not really cheap to do. So that's where the dilemma comes from that. So that's where, once you get used to the drop-in method, it's pretty straightforward.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just scrolling down here. So sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. So it's Gwynlem Summers. Is there no way you can do your show without having to edit or talk into the computer, then play your music same way as in studio?
I think, yeah, just like we were, I think, yeah, it's probably the same as Nancy's question. There are ways to do it, but I think that those ways are, like, it sounds like it was less complicated, but they're actually much more complex and involve having a lot of different equipment or different types of software installed into your computer to make sure that can happen. You'd probably have to be using some sort of audio workstation to record into at the very least, and that audio workstation would have to be quite advanced because it would have to be able to be dealing with multiple inputs in the same way that our panels and studios can do. Yeah, unfortunately not a super easy workaround.
It's investment in equipment that will allow you to have that workflow. So you have to get a mixer so you can plug in another laptop to play to, or your phone to play your songs from, and then you can do it all live.
Excellent. And Dee's asked here, what to do when Zoom does not work through PC speakers despite testing, uninstalling, switching off and on your PC, etc.
I've never come across that option before. Yeah, it sounds to me like a computer without the necessary sound cards and so forth, because most computers will have that ability. So I'm guessing, based on that description there, that you have a computer that does not have either an inbuilt speaker or an inbuilt microphone. So again, using, say, for example, a USB headset, which is going to be providing you both headphones and a microphone, might help solve that particular problem. But other than that, yeah, Zoom is certainly geared up to be able to have both the sound coming through and the sound being received.
Yeah, I guess I wonder if there is, like, if that person is able to get sound from their internet, from like their regular Chrome browser or Safari or whatever they're using, if they're able to get it from there and not Zoom. I don't know. It might be about the preference of a particular program.
And I might just add in there, definitely give Zoom tech support a call. They'll be more than willing to help. I have seen a few Zoom questions pop up in the chat that I have answered earlier. They're really great over at Zoom. I've been speaking to them a number of times over the week, in regards to online training and things like that. So they're more than happy to answer all your tech questions, and they'll be able to give you more of an answer on that as well. And now we have another wonderful question here from Victoria. So it's quite a long one. So I do a weekly live to air issues talk show with guests. I occasionally pre-record using Audition at the station. However, the station I broadcast from shut down at short notice on Friday. So although I live across the road from the studios, as I said before, New Zealand is in total lockdown and people are not allowed to leave their homes. I'm an ex-film video and have been making shows for 20 plus years, so I understand the principles, but I've always relied on pro gear with guests in the studios occasion. Before the lockdown, my co-producer and IT guy and I recorded a show in my living room using Skype, a snowball mic and Audacity, which he edited and sent to the station. But whether and how well we can work together now, I don't know. We won't get much help from the station if we get a file to them by 2 p.m. Fridays. They'll schedule our show, but that's it. I have an HP Pro laptop and Android phone. So that was just a spiel by Victoria Quaid, who has been discussing how she makes her shows remotely.
And it sounds like she's got all the equipment there. And yeah, as per that earlier slide that Maddie and I were displaying about things like Zoom, Google Hangouts and so forth. Yeah, I think at this point in time with what's going on, especially when you're in a situation like that where you're locked out of your studio, we need to be a little bit more resourceful. And yeah, I get it that the recording quality may be a little bit down, but I think we need to be a little bit more flexible now in terms of our production protocol. So long as the sound is not distorting, so long as the microphones are fairly clear, then that should be considered good enough for broadcast quality. So yeah, there's no reason why using those techniques that Victoria's outlined there, she can't put together a program which will then be broadcast on her station. Yeah, but yeah, thanks for sharing that, Victoria. It's interesting to know what's happening across the Tasman at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, Victoria. She also just added there, what I want to be able to do is live shows with guests. I can record via Skype or some other software if I can access something for cheap and free. So Maddie and Jason have given loads of awesome examples there of some cheap software, free software as well. So get your hands on that. It'd be really, really useful. All right, and now I'm just going down, seeing if I've missed anything. So Russell Anderson has just said, I spoke to a tech yesterday who said Dropbox is the best delivery from home to station because it can be scheduled from the studio computer. So that's a great little addition there from Russell. Now, is there anything else that you guys haven't touched on that you think is really important, or anything to remind these guys?
Earlier on, Gavin from Koori Radio put a great suggestion in about like a budget sort of list. So we've talked a lot about the different types of tools that can be used. One of Maddie's earlier slides, the one where it was talking about the microphones and so forth, there was a little bit of a price range there. But yeah, we will put something together and distribute it out amongst the sector. A little bit of a shopping list of some of the items that we've talked about today, and then that way people can look at that in terms of what their own budgets are, and also in terms of the equipment that they've already got. Because as we've been saying all along today, yeah, it's all about making use of the stuff that you've got. And in a lot of cases, you may have a lot of these items already. There's no need to go and spend thousands of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Excellent.
use what you got. Like, try stuff out. Like, audio is a weird beast sometimes, but trial and error. Just play with stuff.
Yeah, I think like you can get yourself like a fancy $2,000 condenser microphone if you want to, but sometimes having that microphone and recording, in a space that's not particularly friendly to recording isn't going to sound as good as you just use phone and setting yourself up in a closet somewhere and really thinking about how you're doing it. So it's like less about the equipment you have and more about the technique you're using and the creativity that you're employing, I think.
Excellent. And Amelia's just said here, could you recap the FFmpeg conversion, please?
Is that for the iTunes conversion? Is that what we mean?
I believe so, yeah, the double FMPEG conversion.
So if that's for, what's that for? I'm just Googling FFmpeg. Do you know what that is, Jason?
I think they're referring to sound format. So we didn't actually talk about that particular one earlier on, or if we did, I didn't capture it. But again, that's one that we need to throw back to you to talk with your individual stations. So most of the digital audio workstations will work with multiple file formats. I guess the file format that you need to check with your station is the file format that you will ultimately produce or export the audio in. So some stations may have particular requirements around that, and you'll need to check with them before you embark on that journey.
And Trish has just added in there that FFmpeg is recommended by Audacity. When you import from iTunes, the M4A file can be converted by FFmpeg, which is free software.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can do that in
also...
Audacity. If you get the FFmpeg libraries for Audacity, you can just drag M4A files in.
Oh, that's great.
So that's another great tip. And I've just answering a question here. So the recording for our webinar will be up on the CBAA YouTube tomorrow and on the CMTO website. So if you have missed it or did want to rewatch it all over again, you can catch it tomorrow. Is there anything you guys like to add before we shut the webinar down?
Here are our emails.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, though Jason, Maddie, or Joe, or even myself, I'll pop my my email down in the chat box as well. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at those emails. And the wonderful Danny Chifley from CBAA will be sending everyone out just an email to share all the helpful links from the webinar, and as well just any general questions you want answered. So
Thanks, Helen.
I think that's amazing. Now, I just seen Jordana said, Danny is in the session. Danny, can you hear us? Are you here?
Danny!
We can see your slides, Danny. Just can't seem to hear you. Okay.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks, everyone. I might just speak on behalf of Danny. Tune in next Tuesday for the sponsorship fundraising and revenue in response to COVID-19. It's the webinar on 11 a.m. next week. So tune in for that one. It does say Thursday, the 26th of March, but it will be Tuesday, the 31st. So sponsorship, fundraising and revenue. And you can look on the CMTO website for more information and to register, as well as the CBAA for the latest news on to register for that one. So keep an eye out. There'll be plenty more webinars coming your way. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.